Welcome back, listeners. We're about to take a deep dive into one of the all-time greats, Double Indemnity. It's a film that pretty much wrote the book on film noir, and almost 80 years later, people are still talking about it.
What gets me about this one, though, is that it isn't just a stylish thriller.
Yeah.
It really digs into what's lurking beneath the surface of the American dream, that anxiety.
Okay, so to start unpacking this, Double Indemnity is based on a novella by James M. Cain.
Right.
But what's wild is that the novella itself was inspired by an actual murder case.
Yeah, pretty sensational one, too.
1927, a woman and her lover decide to, well, get rid of her husband.
It was a huge scandal at the time.
And Cain, he was a journalist back then.
Front row seat to the whole thing. It's no wonder the story stuck with him.
Totally. But then getting Double Indemnity made, that was almost a crime in itself.
Oh, tell me about it. The Hays Code, those censors, they almost shut it down.
Adultery, murder, all that good stuff. Apparently too spicy for the 1940s.
Can you imagine? This film, almost too scandalous to exist, and it becomes a masterpiece.
Well, it makes you wonder, though, right? Did all that fighting, that pushback, make the film even darker, even more subversive?
It probably didn't hurt. But speaking of clashes, we've got to talk about Wilder and Chandler.
Wilder, the director, and Raymond Chandler, the novelist, co-writing the screenplay. What a pair!
Two massive talents, but constantly butting heads. Wilder wanted that sharp dialogue, subverting expectations.
And Chandler...
He's got his hard-boiled prose, this whole style, and frankly, he wasn't a huge fan of Cain to begin with.
I read somewhere that Chandler called the original novella absolute shit.
Wilder said that, yeah. Can you believe it? But that's what makes it so fascinating.
Two brilliant minds, totally different approaches, and somehow they create an icon.
Like mixing oil and water and getting, champagne.
Wilder even said that working with Chandler was like playing tennis with someone who's deaf and dumb, so yeah, not exactly smooth sailing. But despite all that drama, they pulled it off. A brilliant script.
You almost wonder if that tension, that back and forth, is what made it so good. Added another layer of, darkness, cynicism to it all.
It's true. Sometimes those clashes lead to something unexpected. Brilliant, even. Speaking of brilliance, we can't ignore Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh, as Phyllis Dietrichson, the ultimate femme fatale. Please.
This role, it put her in a whole other league.
Stanwyck, she was so good at those subtle things. She could be a villain, sure, but there was always depth there, a vulnerability.
Like Phyllis is more a product of her situation than some evil mastermind.
Exactly. Stuck in that marriage, looking for her own way out.
I read that she was hesitant to take the part at first, though, right?
Yeah, she was known for playing the good girl, worried about her image. Wilder had to really push her.
Really? What did he say?
Something like, "Are you a mouse or an actress?" And Stanwyck, she stepped up.
But even Wilder, later on, he said he regretted that blonde wig she wore.
Think about it. That wig, it's iconic, sure, but it also sort of plays into that whole femme fatale stereotype. Makes her more of a caricature than a real complex person. And that's not what Wilder's going for. He wanted depth.
So by focusing on that visual, it almost simplified her, made her less nuanced.
Exactly. He kind of shot himself in the foot with that one.
That makes me think about something I read, the idea that the femme fatale, she wasn't just some male fantasy,
Right.
She was also this symbol of women pushing back against expectations. A little rebellious, maybe. And film noir, with all its darkness, it gave filmmakers space to explore these themes, things that were usually taboo. Gender roles, repressed desires, all of that.
It's true. Double Indemnity uses those classic noir elements so well.
The darkness, the shadows, even those Venetian blinds chopping up faces with light.
All of it creates this world where nothing is clear-cut, good and bad, right and wrong. They get all blurry. And then there's that score. Miklos Rosa.
I love his work.
Wilder wanted something to reflect the conspiratorial activities of Walter and Phyllis. And boy, did Rosa deliver.
It's like the music itself is telling you something's wrong. Adds that layer of tension.
Exactly. But there's this other aspect of film noir that I think we often overlook. Its connection to racial anxieties, especially after World War II.
Interesting. So we're talking anxieties beyond just gender roles now. What's the connection?
Well, after the war, things were shifting. Beneath the surface, there was this unease, this tension. Men coming home, women having entered the workforce. Things weren't the same.
And you're saying film noir, with its crime and betrayal and dangerous women, it reflected those anxieties.
Absolutely. The femme fatale, even though she's usually white, She becomes a symbol of these broader fears.
Like a stand-in for something threatening the established order.
Exactly. And it's not just the stories themselves, but the way they're told. The visuals. Think about Double Indemnity again. That darkness, those shadows, they're not just stylistic choices. They tap into this fear of the unknown, of what's lurking beneath the surface.
So even though the film is in black and white, there's all this other stuff going on, these layers of meaning. It's not just about the crime, it's about all these tensions and anxieties simmering in society at the time.
Exactly. Film noir, it's a window into the American psyche. And Double Indemnity is a perfect example of how those anxieties played out on screen.
So those anxieties, they weren't just about gender, right? You mentioned race playing a part in all of this. What about Double Indemnity? How does it fit in?
Think about the visuals again, all that darkness, the shadows, the hidden stuff.
Yeah.
That wasn't just for looks, it was a metaphor. And after the war, one of the biggest unspoken fears, it was the perceived threat of blackness.
Hold on, how does that connect to the specific film? The main characters are white.
It's subtle, but it's there. Look at how Wilder uses visuals, symbols, to play on those anxieties. Think about that first meeting. Walter Neff and Phyllis Dietrichson. She's at the top of the stairs, all in shadow. Her face is hidden.
Yeah, you're right. She's almost like coming out of the darkness itself. Like she represents something dangerous, something unknown.
Exactly. That imagery, darkness, the unknown, that's what white America was afraid of back then. Blackness was often linked to that, the transgressive, the dangerous.
So the femme fatale, even though she's white, she kind of embodies these racial anxieties.
In a way, yeah. The film isn't explicitly about race, but those anxieties are woven into the story, visually. And it wasn't just Double Indemnity. You see it in other noirs, too, like Out of the Past. The main character goes into a black nightclub, and it's like crossing a line, into the forbidden.
Wow. So much going on beneath the surface. It's not just a genre, it's a reflection of society. But shifting gears for a sec, what makes this film such a masterclass in storytelling? Beyond the visuals, the themes, what about Wilder's technique?
The voiceover narration. It's common in film noir, but Wilder uses it so well. Right from the start, you hear Walter Neff. He's already confessed. His time is running out.
And that voiceover, it keeps you hooked because you're trying to figure out, how did he get here? What went wrong?
Like a puzzle box. Each scene is a piece. And the way Wilder jumps back and forth, present, past, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
You're piecing it together with Walter, trying to figure out his motivations.
And the dialogue, oh man, the dialogue.
Sharp, witty, even funny sometimes, which is wild considering how dark this story is. They made cynicism sound elegant.
Like, I killed him for money and a woman. I didn't get the money and I didn't get the woman.
Classic. Sums up Walter's whole downfall. It's bleak, but there's this poetry to it, Like your desires will destroy you, but in a beautiful way.
And the delivery. Stanwyck, McMurray, Robinson, they all bring something special.
Oh, absolutely. But Wilder was obsessed with details, you know that. Everything had to be perfect. How do you think that affected the film?
I'd say it worked out pretty well for him.
Wilder knew every little thing, the lighting, the music, costumes, it all mattered. Take the cinematography by John F. Seitz. Deep shadows, those stark contrasts, and those Venetian blinds.
Letting across spaces, yeah.
It's not just pretty. It adds to that feeling of being trapped, claustrophobic.
Both literally and, like you said before, metaphorically.
Right. And then there's Miklos Rosa's score. Wilder wanted something to reflect the conspiratorial activities, and Rosa nailed it. Haunting, jazzy, builds the tension.
It's like the music is a character itself, closing in on them. All those elements together, it's what makes it such an unforgettable film.
And speaking of unforgettable, the ending. Did you know Wilder originally wanted to show Walter's execution in the gas chamber?
Wow, really? I can see why he changed his mind. That would have been too much.
Too graphic, yeah. What we get is much better. Walter confessing to Keyes, his friend, played by the amazing Edward G. Robinson. And as those sirens wail, Walter collapses. Can't even light a cigarette.
It's heartbreaking, but powerful. Not a happy ending, but not completely hopeless either. Keyes, he represents the good that Walter threw away.
It's that contrast, the dark and the light, that's what makes it work. It says, yeah, we're all capable of bad things, but there's always a chance for redemption, even if it comes at a huge cost.
Wow. And to think this film almost didn't happen. Talk about a legacy. But speaking of which, how has Double Indemnity changed filmmaking since then? It seems like its influence goes way beyond just film noir.
You're right. It's everywhere. Take neo-noirs like Body Heat.
Mm-hmm.
Same basic idea, femme fatale. Dangerous scheme, but updated.
Like that story, the lust, the greed, the manipulation, it works in any time period, any setting.
And it's not just the story, it's the visuals too. The shadows, the framing, it's in everything from Fatal Attraction to Basic Instinct. And the femme fatale, she gets even more dangerous.
It's fascinating how she's changed over time, but she's still got that same power, alluring and dangerous.
That's what makes her so interesting, that duality.
Yeah.
But Double Indemnity's influence, it's not just thrillers. You see it in To Die For, even comedies like Fargo, where these characters get caught in schemes that go way too far.
Like ripples, spreading out. Wilder's themes, his ideas, they keep inspiring people.
Even in TV, look at Mad Men. The ambition, the affairs, the dark side of that American dream, it's all there. It's amazing. A film from 1944 still feels so relevant. But what do you think it is, the secret to his appeal? Why do we still care? It's got to be the combination, right? The storytelling, the characters, this timeless look at human nature.
Yeah.
Wilder wasn't afraid to show us the ugly parts, what happens when desire takes over.
And he did it with such style. The lines, the visuals, it all just grabs you.
It works on so many levels. You can enjoy the thrills, but there's also that deeper stuff. Morality, betrayal, consequences.
And he was so good at those little moments, the things people don't say that tell you everything.
Like when Walter first goes to Phyllis's house. So much tension, so much desire, just in the way they look at each other, how they move around the room.
Sometimes silence speaks volumes.
Wilder understood that. He was a master.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, any final thoughts for the listener? What should they take away from this?
Double Indemnity is more than just a film noir. It's about us, the good and the bad. It's a reminder that we all have choices to make. And those choices, they make us who we are.
Okay, so we've talked about how Double Indemnity isn't just some old movie. It's still influencing films today. But what are some concrete examples of that?
Well, you see it right away in neo-noirs.
Okay.
Like Body Heat, that was 1981. It takes that femme fatale setup, the dangerous scheme, but gives it a modern twist.
It's interesting how that story, the lust, the greed, the manipulation, it all still works no matter the setting.
Right. And it's not just the plot. Double Indemnity changed how films look. Think about those shadows, the contrasts, that tight framing. You see in thrillers like Fatal Attraction and Basic Instinct. And the femme fatale, she becomes even more dangerous in those.
She's evolved, but that core element is still there, right? That mix of attraction and danger.
Absolutely. That's what makes her so compelling, that push and pull. But Double Indemnity, it goes beyond just thrillers. You see it in To Die For, even some dark comedies like Fargo, where those characters get caught in schemes that go haywire.
It's those ripples you were talking about, right? Wilder's ideas, they keep going, inspiring other filmmakers.
And TV shows, too.
Yeah.
Think about Mad Men. All that ambition, the affairs, that dark side of the American dream. Double Indemnity is like its ancestor, in a way.
It really shows you how brilliant Wilder was, a film from 1944, and it's still shaping things today. What do you think is the key to its staying power? Why do we keep coming back to it?
For me, it's got to be the whole package. The story, the characters, and how it captures human nature.
Yeah.
The timeless stuff. Wilder wasn't afraid to show us the darkness. What happens when desire goes too far?
And he did it with such flair. Those lines, the visuals, it's just gripping.
Exactly. It's a film you can enjoy on different levels. A thriller, sure, but it also makes you think about morality, betrayal, consequences.
And he was great at those subtle moments, the things people don't say, but you know what they mean.
Like that scene where Walter goes to Phyllis's house for the first time. So much unspoken tension, desire. It's all in their glances, their movements.
Powerful stuff. Sometimes silence says more than words.
Wilder knew that. That's what makes him a master.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Double Indemnity, what's the one thing you want to leave with our listeners?
Double Indemnity is more than just a good film noir. It's about all of us, the good and the bad. It's a reminder that we all have choices, and those choices, well, they shape who we become.
That's a powerful thought. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the complexities of Double Indemnity and maybe see it with fresh eyes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.